So hello world, welcome to another tutorial, and in this one I will be teaching you how to use the AES context object in order to encrypt data that you're saving so that nobody can be able to just open up the file and change data which you have saved so that they can give themselves like nearly infinite HP or change their stats. So this is a follow-up tutorial of a previous video I made where I illustrated that problem. So that video was about saving files with JSON or saving data, game data with JSON. And if you want to follow along, you can go back and watch that video. I will leave the link in the description. So once you watch it, you can come back and we can continue. But if you can just follow along, please do. So with that, if you like this kind of content and you would like to see more in the future, please do consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions or suggestions for content you would like for me to do in the future, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. So with that, we can get to the tutorial. So in the previous video, what I did for saving was I basically turned this into a JSON text, and then I saved that text, and then for loading I just got that text from the file, and then I turned it back into a dictionary which we could use. So that all of that was done by this. I turned it into a text, saved that text, and then for loading I got that text, and then I turned it back into a dictionary. So now we are going to add an extra step to our process. So we're just going to turn this into a text as we did, and then we're going to encrypt that text and then save the encrypted text. And then for loading, we are going to get that encrypted text, decrypt it, and then we are going to turn it back into a dictionary. So with that, we can now get to actually scripting. So the first thing we want to do is under our JSON stringify function where we were turning this object into a text, what I want to do is I'll just come below it, and I'm then going to create another variable, and it will be called AES, and it will be equal to an AES context object dot new. It shouldn't have any arguments. So the AES context object is an object that holds various encryption standards or methods. So if you want to read more about it, you can just click Control or Command, and once this is highlighted, you can just click it, and then you're going to read more about it. So AES is short for Advanced Encryption Standard, and it supports these methods of encryption. So you can read more about it in the future when you want, but for me, I'll just move on. So once you have your object, two things you have to know about this object is that it works in bytes, and the bytes have to be 16 or divisible by 16. So I'll just illustrate what that means in a few, and all of those steps are actually quite easy to get. So the first process once we have our object, when we want to encrypt the data, is we're just going to come up here and we're going to create a variable called key, and this will be the password that we're going to be using to encrypt and decrypt the data. So it's like a password basically, but not quite, but it's basically like a password. So once we have our key and it's supposed to be a string, we have to ensure that the key is either 16 or 32 characters long. So what I'm going to do is it can be any text, so like hello world, and then if you want to make it like divisible by 16 or 16 or 32 characters long, what you want to do is you're just going to maybe add like some spaces, or you might add something like exclamation marks and random stuff as padding. As long as it's 16 or 32 characters long, it will work. Or it can even just be a long text, but it has to be divisible by 16 or 32. So for me, I'll just use numbers which I know are exactly 16 characters long, so I don't have to count. So 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0 1 2 3 4 5. So that's 16 characters long. And then in order to convert them into bytes, which we can then feed into this object, we are basically just going to say to UTF-8 buffer, UTF-8 buffer, and we are done. So we have the bytes which we can use as a key. So one more thing about this key, or one thing about this key, is that you won't really store it here in your code you should store this somewhere more secure. So you might use something like OS variables, or for an online game you might store the key in a password so that nobody with access to your code can just find it. But that's not really part of the scope of this tutorial. For this, it will just work, or if nobody will find your source code, you can just leave it over here. So for the tutorial, I'm just going to have it here. So once you have your key and it's 16 characters long and you've converted it into bytes, you can feed it into the object. So the first step is you're just going to say aes.start, and then you're going to pass in the mode which you want to encrypt it in, or the method. So we're going to be using ECB encrypt, and then you're going to pass in the key. So that's the first step. So you have your key, convert it into bytes, and then you tell the AES object to start in this mode and to use this key. So once you have that, you can get to the second step, which is actually encrypting the data. And for that, we will also have to ensure that the string of this dictionary is 16 characters long. So currently it's, when we say print the length of this file, we're going to see that it's not really divisible by 16. No defined scene to run, so I'll just open up my scene, and then when I run this and I press save, we're going to see that our text is 25 characters long, and we want to turn this into 32 because that's the next multiple of 16. So how we'll do that is quite easy. We're just going to use a formula, a simple formula. We're going to say var remainder to 16 is equal to 16 minus the current length of the text modulus 16. So this formula over here will give us the number of characters remaining in order for this one to be divisible by 16. So in our case, the next multiple of 16 is 32, and it will give us the number of characters remaining. So basically what I'm doing is, if the text had 17 characters, it will say modulus 16, it's going to give us a remainder of 1. And then once we have that remainder, what we're going to say is 16 minus that 1, we'll get 15, and then we're just going to add that 15 to the 17, and then we're going to get 32. So basically this formula over here gives us the number of remaining characters, and then we're going to add that number of characters to our current length, and then we're going to get our text to be divisible by 32. So I'll just remove this comment. So once we have the number of remaining character, we are going to say var padded text is equal to our current text, then plus an empty space, or it can be any form of padding you'd want. Then this should be repeated the remaining number of times, so remainder to 16. And now we'll have a text that is 32 characters long. So if I say print, and then I print our padded text dot length, we're going to see that it is divisible by 16, or it's 32 characters which is divisible by 16. So save, and we can see it's 32 characters now. So we can now feed this into the object. So this key has to be 16 or 32 characters long, but the text which you're going to save can be any multiple of 16. So yeah, and it's easy to do that. So it's just 2 lines of code. And then finally, oh, one more thing I almost forgot. We're going to save our data is equal to our padded text dot to UTF-8 buffer, because you remember that this object works in bytes and it gives out bytes and takes in inputs as bytes. So we have to convert our padded text into bytes. So once we have that, we're going to come down here. Then we're just going to create a variable called encrypted data, and this will be equal to aes.update, and then we are going to be updating this data over here. So this update method is basically what encrypts the data. And then finally we can just say aes.finish, and we have encrypted the data, and we can now save it. So at the method, or at this place where we are going to be saving the data, instead of storing this JSON string which can be edited, what we can now do is we can come over here and then we can say file. Well, let me illustrate something first of all. So if I go back here to my user data folder, I explained what this is in the previous video. So it's basically where your data will be stored. So you can go and watch it so that you can understand. So if I open my folder and I check my text over here, if anybody were to come over here as I saved it, he can maybe give themselves like this number of HP. But once we encrypt it, you're going to see that we can't really know what's in the text, so we won't be able to change it. So if I come here and say file.store, and then I store a buffer, because this is in bytes. You remember the object works in bytes. It takes in input as bytes and it gives out bytes. So whatever this is in bytes. So if we store those bytes, so store buffer and then we store the bytes, the encrypted data, and then we reload, we run the scene again, and we press save. If we come back here to our folder, we can see that basically what we have is gibberish, and if we change something here, we are just going to cause the entire project to break down, so we will rather not do anything. So that's what encryption is. So unless somebody knows the key and the method you used to encrypt the data, they won't be able to change anything, or they can change, but if they change it, they're just going to break everything. So maybe, for example, if I change like that, and then I come here to my project and then I say load, if I press load, you can see that we get basically nonsense which we can't use. So that's basically what encryption is. So if we change stuff, we are just going to cause the entire project to break. So that's basically how you encrypt data. And how do you decrypt it so that you can use it? So I reload my scene and press save so that I can reset everything, and then I come here to my load function. So for loading, what we're going to do is we're just going to create the same variable called AES, and this will be equal to an AES context object dot new, and then we're going to say AES dot start again, but in this time we're going to start it in the ECB decrypt mode, and then we're going to pass in the same key, the exact same key which we used to encrypt the data. If you use a different key, you're going to get different result or nonsense back. So it has to be the same key. And then once you have that key, what you're going to say is var decrypted data is equal to aes.update, and then you're going to be updating something. So what you're going to be updating is this file. In the previous tutorial, we used to get the file as a text because it was just saved as a text, but now we are supposed to get bytes because we stored bytes. Now we have to get bytes back. So we're just going to say file dot get buffer, and then this buffer has to be a certain length, and the length it is the entire length of the file. So file dot get length. So we're basically getting all of the bytes in that file. So we can change this from saved text to something like saved bytes or saved data. And then we're going to say our decrypted data is equal to aes.update, and then we're going to say to decrypt that data which we stored. So saved data, and then we're going to pass it over here. Oh, sorry, it's supposed to be saved data. So once I've fed my data into the updating method or to the decrypting method, I can just say aes.finish, and I have finished decrypting my data. So with this, I have the padded text back. And now we can get to, once we've decrypted the data, we can pass our text or our dictionary. Oh yeah, because you remember that this is in bytes. Remember that this is in bytes, so you can say over here to get string from UTF-8, but we can just create another variable for this. So var text is equal to decrypted data dot get string from UTF-8. So let me just comment this out. The error is quite annoying. Then I can just comment all of these out from the previous code. So basically what I've done is I've decrypted the data with this, and I got the result in bytes. So now I'm converting the bytes back into a text. So I'm getting a string from the UTF-8 buffer. So you remember here we converted it into bytes. Now we are converting those bytes back into a text. And now finally we can say var saved dictionary is equal to our json.parseString. So json.parseString turns our text back into a dictionary, and this is the text that we're going to pass in. And now we have basically gotten back our data, and we can print it. So if I come over here and I reload the scene, then I press save, then I press load, we can see that we have our dictionary back. So that's basically how you encrypt data. It's not too difficult of a process, but you can rewatch this video as many times as you'd like so that you can just digest the content if you didn't understand it well. But I'm going to give you a recap and then I can close the video. So what we did was basically we converted this into a text, and then we encrypted that text and then saved the encrypted data. And then for loading, we got that encrypted data, decrypted it, and converted it back into a string. So we turned our text into a string, and then we ensured that string was divisible by 16, or yeah, that string, the number of characters in that string was divisible by 16. And then once we got our string and it's divisible by 16, we encrypted the string and turned it into bytes, which we could then store. And then for loading, we got our bytes in the file we stored, and then we decrypted those bytes. We turned those bytes back into a text, and then we turned that text back into a dictionary. So that's the entire process. And then finally, we just said that the player character we have currently is the data or the player that we saved. So all the stats will be loaded, and then we just printed the dictionary. So that's the basic process. If you didn't understand it quite well, you can just rewatch the video again. And yeah, that's how you save data and encrypt it. So if you learned something new and you would like to see more content like this in the future, please do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions or suggestions for content you would like for me to do in the future, feel free to leave them down below. And with that, I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.